In the hours after an unprecedented event that has shaken the nation took place, I have been doing my research. And what you now have is a comprehensive, investigative video which may help answer many questions. Of course, not all of them, not nearly all of them. But it will help us answer many questions that are still lingering in the minds and hearts of Kenyans. Now, the problem with some aircraft accident investigations is that there are no witnesses, and that can be a huge problem. You will have heard of aircraft accidents happening in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, in the middle of the night. And even with the available very impressive technology, it becomes quite a challenge to investigate it. Well, not in this particular case, because the helicopter accident that took the life of General Francis Ogolla and others had dozens of witnesses, maybe even more. And here's the first super fascinating fact I want us to take careful note of. Ordinarily, all the witnesses would have been military officers. Military officers don't talk of you. They don't talk to the press. They are not even supposed to talk to their relatives. But in this particular case, something out of the ordinary, something unexpected happened that suddenly changed the circumstances. You see, this particular area in Elgeyo Marakwet, where this accident unfolded, is one of the areas in our country that has been badly affected by bandit attacks. And the bandit crisis in the North Rift is very serious. And so, farming activities have been affected. But it just happened, and this little known fact would have escaped many, that a community-based organization which had been launched by former police boss Joseph Boynet decided to go ahead with their farming activities despite the very threatening environment. Because you see, where banditry is happening, even if you farm, even if you successfully get to harvest, it can all be gone in a flash, either burnt down or stolen. Bandit areas are not a joke. But for a reason that may not be clear, farming was going on very close, adjacent to the military facility where that chopper took off on its last fateful flight and actually landed on this particular farm where people were working the land. Those were witnesses who were not supposed to be there. And those witnesses have a mind-blowing story to tell. They say, multiple eyewitnesses, that when the helicopter took off, it was already making strange noises. Now, there are a lot of things that are very wrong about that. You see, before takeoff, there are various checks which are done to ensure that that particular aircraft can take off and fly. Okay? And therefore, if there's the slightest suggestion that there's a problem, that takeoff will be aborted. The helicopter will not take off. The strange noises heard by the eyewitnesses suggest possible problems that would easily have been detected when the chopper was still on the ground, and therefore the takeoff aborted. And so in this particular scenario, there are only two possibilities. Only two. One is not only unlikely, but ridiculous. And that is that the chopper took off despite the strange noises. The other possibility, much more likely, is that it took off and very shortly after it left the ground, the strange noises started. Most likely, the chopper gained the height required to fly forward, started flying forward, and that is when the strange noises started. Now already, that information raises massive suspicions. But let us finish the eyewitnesses' account. And so as this chopper, which was in the air but very low on the ground, meaning that from takeoff it did not gain much height, these noises continued, and according to eyewitnesses, became worse. Other eyewitnesses say the noise changed, and then the rotors stopped rotating. And some eyewitnesses say it continued flying as if it was going to make an emergency landing somewhere on the very farm where these eyewitnesses were farming. But they realized that there was something very wrong when the helicopter came crashing down with a loud bang and caught fire. Now, we don't want to speculate on this video. I'm just giving you the facts according to eyewitnesses, and the facts linked to those people closely involved with this incident. Now, the people working on the farm who had witnessed this accident didn't know what to do next. But one of them had the telephone number of a KDF officer, a senior KDF officer, and they promptly called him and told him what had happened. He advised them, because they were on the scene, to do their best to rescue the victims. And they tell us some of them were talking, some of them were breathing, and they had to break the windows and brave the heat from the fire to get to most of them. But then they succeeded and removed all of them from the wreckage. And that is when KDF officers arrived and cordoned off the area and requested these first responders to move away, to move out of that area. It is estimated that this took place approximately between 1:30 p.m. and 2 o'clock p.m. And then social media kicked in, before even the mainstream media had an inkling that something had happened. Now, in our African custom, it is taboo to declare anybody dead. Otherwise, those first responders who triggered this whole social media breaking of this news would have easily been able to estimate how many survivors would emerge from this particular incident, because they were there. They pulled out the victims. They saw the condition of the victims. Although I doubt if they would have been able to identify with certainty the identity of those people they rescued. Now, it is also critical in trying to get answers to questions to carefully observe the behavior and the utterances of other people in relation to this particular tragedy. On the floor of the National Assembly at about 3:34 p.m., Legislator Millie Adhiambo interrupted the debate on a point of order, requesting a clarification from UDA as to the safety and well-being of the Chief of the Defense Forces, Francis Ogolla. She wanted clarification as to whether what was flooding social media about a chopper accident was true or was just a rumor. Leader of the majority, Kimani Ichung'wah, stood up and responded. And some of his initial words were very interesting and, in my opinion, instructive. Ichung'wah started by saying, "All I can say," note that statement, "all I can say." Now, the way I interpret that is that he had already been briefed on what to say, and at the center of that briefing were the instructions: give as little information as possible. Because it is rather obvious those who briefed him at this point already knew that General Francis Ogolla was no more. And very, very strange, Ichung'wah kept on saying, as you have seen on social media, as you have seen on social media, this is true. As you have seen on social media, that is true. But he did not confirm the death of General Ogolla. He did not confirm the number of casualties. In fact, he hardly said anything other than to confirm that actually a helicopter accident had happened in Elgeyo Marakwet. And then something strange started happening on Twitter. Somebody made a very determined effort to try and convince Kenyans that General Ogolla was still alive and all was well. And then somebody did something very valuable to all of us Kenyans. They got hold of a man called Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. Now, please allow me a quick rewind so that you understand why Kalonzo Musyoka's initial impressions are valuable. In the year 2012, when the helicopter carrying Professor George Saitoti and Oro Ojode came crashing down somewhere in the Gong forest, one of the first people on the scene was Kalonzo Musyoka, and he was captured on video, and he was also captured on photographs. His face, his expression, his actions spoke much louder than words, and they spoke volumes. His body language told us very loudly that this was foul play. Somebody had murdered Professor George Saitoti and Oro Ojode in a most brutal, inhuman manner using a helicopter crash. Unajua wakubwa wanajuanga vitu ambaye sisi hatujui, zengine tunajua baadaye, zengine hatutawahi kujua. And of course later on, as the investigation into this chopper accident that ended the life of Professor George Saitoti and Oro Ojode, as the details came out, it became very clear that this was a case of foul play. It became crystal clear that this was a political assassination, especially when information leaked out that a very senior government official close to the then Mwai Kibaki government had been asked at the last minute not to board that helicopter. In fact, very spirited efforts had been made, frantic ones, to ensure that he gets off that chopper. Now, to me, that was the most telling evidence that there were some people who already knew what was going to happen. But back to the present. Kalonzo Musyoka was interviewed via telephone, and he sounded alarmed. He sounded like he was in exactly the same body language formation as he was at the Gong Forest on the day Professor George Saitoti left this planet. And then, for avoidance of doubt, right at the end of that interview, Kalonzo Musyoka told us that he had taken off at Wilson Airport at about the same time that General Ogolla's chopper was taking off. And Kalonzo Musyoka was, of course, on his way, flying, to attend the funeral of former President Daniel Toroitich arap Moi's daughter. And Kalonzo posed the question, why was a military helicopter taking off from the Wilson Airport, especially carrying such a senior Kenya Defense Forces officer? Why was it taking off at the Wilson Airport instead of the Isli Air Base, where military aircrafts and choppers usually take off from? He posed that question. And then Bwana Musyoka ended by saying that he believed Azimio were going to issue a statement. And he revealed that indeed, the next day, which is today, Azimio were due to have a meeting, after which they would release a statement. Now, think about it. Why would it be necessary for all this, a meeting and then a statement, after an accident, a very unfortunate and avoidable accident, happens? Why would there be need for a statement from Azimio? Think about it. Now, I want us to realize something, in case we don't already know. The passing on of a CDF, is not very different from the passing on of a president. It is something very serious. You see, just the simple fact that the commander of our defense forces is a member of the Security Council, usually chaired by the president, the highest security organ in the country. Already that tells you a lot, because there are a lot of sensitive government secrets in this particular Security Council. Very many. And the person heading the defense forces is bang in the middle of most of them. That is the nature of politics and governance this side of the world. And therefore, armed with that information, it is already very strange and clear, very suspicious, that General Ogolla would have been inside a helicopter, flying all over the place in a bandit-infested region. That is already very strange. And the question is, why would you want to do something like that in the first place? Why? Even if it was an accident, why would you want to do that? Very strange. Now, the reaction from most Kenyans has been very predictable. As we said in my previous video, when this story broke, most Kenyans are very suspicious. It is indeed difficult to find anybody in Kenya who believes that this was an ordinary accident. And that is a major problem for this government, for many reasons. Top on the list is the fact that this is not a stable government. It isn't. It is still faced with massive legitimacy issues, linked to the very fishy, unexplainable elections of August 2022. And happening when it did, especially after a very strange, bizarre incident unfolded somewhere in Turkana, should cause a lot of worry amongst Kenyans. You see, just a few hours before this tragedy, the Kenya Defense Forces released a very strange statement addressing the incident that had taken place somewhere in Turkana, where army officers had been arrested while they were in uniform. Now that one, this is the first time I'm hearing. In my long years of experience, I have never, ever heard of a case of an army officer in uniform being arrested by the police. It never happens. How? How can that even happen? And quite rightly so, the Kenya Defense Forces statement was very interesting. It strongly defended the soldiers, and the statement said that nobody had snatched any firearms from anybody, and nobody had stormed a police station, as the media was reporting. And it concluded by promising a course of action. Now, in case you're still lost, this is not how things are done. The Kenya Defense Forces hardly ever addresses civilians in a public statement over an incident like this one. No! They deal directly with the government, chini ya maji, and the thing is sorted out. So what went wrong in this instance? What went wrong so that everything changed? Of course, those Kenyans who are inexperienced, younger Kenyans, will not notice that there's something very wrong with this Turkana incident, and especially that statement from the KDF. Indeed, one cannot help linking that very strange, bizarre incident with what happened next, and linking it in that both are very strange, unprecedented happenings in our country. Of course, I'll keep you informed as I continue to gather more information. I thank you so much for your time from the bottom of my heart. All for a better Kenya. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.